Most people really think about the power grid only when the lights go out, but the bigger warning signs right now may come before the blackout in the rising demand, the strained infrastructure, the utility bills, and the summer peak loads that are already forcing the country to ask whether we can build power fast enough to keep up. For nearly 2 decades, electricity demand in this country was relatively flat. Utilities, they could plan around slow growth, gradual upgrades, efficiency gains, and predictable demand. And then the forecast changed. Artificial intelligence, data centers, electric vehicles, manufacturing, reshoring, heat waves, electrified homes, and modern life have all started pulling more aggressively on the same system at the same time. The lights, they still may be on in your house today, but the system behind that switch is being asked to do more than it was built to handle comfortably. AI is not going to cause every outage, and data centers are not going to explain every increase in your power bill. And this video is not just about AI. There's more to this problem than that, as I'll explain. AI is just the clearest example right now of a much larger shift where America is adding more electric demand faster than the old planning process was designed to handle. Data centers, electric vehicles, manufacturing, electrified homes, heat waves, and modern life, they're all pulling on the same system at the same time. A simple way to think about it is to think of an older house. Many old houses use tape and tar to insulate wiring. The wiring may have worked fine for lamps, a refrigerator, and a few basic appliances. But once you started adding space heaters, window AC units, freezers, power tools, and EV chargers without upgrading the panel or wiring, the margin disappears. And the house may still work most days, but one hot afternoon, one overloaded circuit, or one more major appliance can suddenly trip the breaker, creating a short or even start a fire. The electrical grid in America is at a critical juncture right now, and we're not talking about a small bump in the road. U.S. electricity use has already been pushing into record territory. EIA projections show total consumption continuing to rise as homes, businesses, data centers, factories, vehicles, heating, cooling, and industrial users all pull on the same system. And for a long time, efficiency has helped hide the problem. A newer refrigerator used less power than the older one. LED lights replaced incandescent bulbs. Better building codes helped in some places. But efficiency can only offset so much when the economy starts adding enormous new loads. And we're not just talking about more people flipping more switches. It's an entire categories of demand that either barely existed a generation ago or were nowhere near this scale. AI training clusters, cloud computing, battery plants, semiconductor facilities, electric vehicle charging, electrified heating, more cooling demand in hotter summers, and more backup systems, they all make sense when you look at them one at a time. But the grid does not fill them one at a time, it fills a total load. For years, the power grid had a strange advantage because demand was not growing the way many people expected. Homes, they became more efficient, light bulbs used less power, appliances improved, and some industrial demand shifted. And we've covered this in previous videos on this channel. Utilities have had some serious maintenance problems, aging equipment, and regional vulnerabilities, but at least the overall demand curve was not exploding upward every year. And those assumptions, they really shaped decades of planning. Power plants, they take years to permit and build. Transmission lines can take even longer because they cross counties and states, private and public land, and they require environmental reviews and face political opposition. Large transformers are not the kind of thing that you can pull off a shelf when one fails. Some of these parts are custom built, expensive, heavy, and slow to replace. And the grid is not like an app that you can update overnight. It is physical infrastructure stretched across the country, built in layers over generations. And electricity has to be generated, moved over transmission lines, stepped down through substations, distributed through local networks, and delivered to your house in real time. And the grid, it has to keep supply and demand balanced every second. And that balance becomes harder when demand shows up in places where the grid was not built to handle it, or when generation is available on paper, but it can't be moved easily to where it is needed. And once failure can force power onto other lines, and if those lines are already stressed, the problem can spread. And when demand was relatively flat, utilities, they had more room to patch, delay, plan, debate, and spread out costs. But when demand starts rising again, old assumptions break down. And the question is no longer whether America can eventually build more power. The question is whether generation, transmission, transformers, permitting, labor, fuel, supply, and local communities can move fast enough to keep up with the demand being added right now. And that's why today's sponsor, the Anker Solix F3800, is a part of my setup. One thing I've learned while building out my property is that when the power goes out, it's not just the lights you have to think about. For me, it's water. My well runs on a 240 volt pump, so reliable backup power is important. That's one reason I've been using the Anker Solix F3800 portable power station. What I like about it is that it supports both 120 volts and 240 volt output and delivers up to 6,000 watts of power from a single unit. To the home power panel, 2 units can be combined for up to 12,000 watts of output, allowing multiple larger loads and appliances to run at the same time. Another standout feature is the expandable design. Each F3800 starts at 3.84 kilowatt hours of capacity and can be expanded up to 26.9 kilowatt hours with additional batteries. Pair 2 units together, and that grows to as much as 53.8 kilowatt hours of total capacity. I've also connected solar panels to help keep it charged and extend runtime during longer outages. Right now is actually a good time to take a look because Anker Solix is running its Prime Day promotion with some of the lowest prices of the years across its lineup. They're also including free gifts with qualifying purchases and a 30-day price guarantee. If you'd like to learn more, check out the link in the description section below. The grid was built for one kind of America, and now it is being asked to power another. The numbers make that hard to dismiss. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found that data centers use about 4.4% of all electricity in the United States in 2023. And by 2028, that number could rise to somewhere between 6.7 and 12%. The International Energy Agency projects that global data center electricity demand could more than double by 2030, with AI-optimized data centers driving much of that growth. Putting that in plain English, data centers are moving from something most people never thought about to something that could soon use a share of U.S. electricity that looks more like a major sector of the economy. And that's not a few server rooms tucked away in office spaces. That is a new layer of national demand being added on top of homes, hospitals, factories, schools, grocery stores, water systems, and everything else already depending on the grid. And this is the part that should make people stop, pay attention, and even sweat a little. For years, the grid had some breathing room because demand was mostly flat. And now some forecasts are bending upward at the same time utilities are still trying to replace aging equipment, connect new projects, build transmission, find transformers, and prepare for hotter summers and sharper winter peaks. The demand curve, it is no longer drifting upward slowly. In some regions, it is starting to turn sharply. And that is why this does not feel like normal growth. Normal growth gives utilities time to plan. And this kind of growth forces utilities to react. And when the system shifts from planning to reacting, the cost, delays, and reliability risks, they don't stay inside utility boardrooms. Eventually, they move outward into communities, construction, fights, connection delays, and monthly bills. The biggest new load in this story is artificial intelligence and the data centers behind it. A data center is not just a building full of computers. At the scale we are now talking about, some facilities behave more like major industrial power users. And Department of Energy advisors have discussed hyperscale AI facilities requiring 300 to 1,000 megawatts or more, which means these are not small office buildings with servers in the back. They are power plant scale demand. One large AI campus can require as much electricity as a mid-sized city. And that is the mental shift that people need to make. We're not talking about a few office buildings plugging into the grid. We're talking about concentrated, round-the-clock demand that can arrive in one region faster than the surrounding power infrastructure can be expanded. We're talking about whole new cities of demand popping up within cities that already have demand issues. Cities of demand on top of a city's demand. That scale matters because a data center does not behave like a neighborhood. It needs reliable electricity, cooling, redundancy, and fast, around-the-clock connectivity. And at the same time, the business behind them is moving much faster than the old grid planning process was built to handle. A company can buy land, raise capital, build server halls, and push for connection quickly. But the transmission lines, substations, transformers, generation capacity, and local approvals needed to serve that load often move on a much slower timeline. The pressure starts to show up in the gap between digital speed and physical infrastructure. AI here is a headline, but it's not the only source of demand. Manufacturing is part of this because the United States is trying to bring back more industrial capacity here at home, especially in semiconductors, batteries, defense production, and advanced manufacturing. And those are power-intensive industries that really require reliable electricity on a large scale. Electrification is another part of this equation. Electric vehicles, they do not break the grid on their own, but millions of vehicles charging over time can become a real strain. Heat pumps, induction cooking, electric water heaters, and electrified industrial processes all change the demand profile too. Some of these technologies can be managed intelligently, and some can help balance load if planned correctly, but they still require a grid that is already for them. Weather is a third part of this equation. Recent heat events are not just hot afternoons. In many places, they are long stretches of high temperatures that settle over a region and keep air conditioners running for days. That turns cooling from a comfort issue into a life safety issue. Sudden cold snaps can create the same kind of stress in the other direction, especially when heating systems, fuel supply, and electric demand all surge at once. And when more of daily life depends on electricity and the grid margin is reduced by electrification and AI, every major weather extreme becomes a critical power event. And this demand is not likely to fade quickly because it is tied to a global competition. And here's the thing, artificial intelligence is not just a side project anymore. It's being treated as a strategic industry by companies and countries, closer to a new industrial arms race rather than a passing tech trend. And that difference, it matters. If this were just another speculative tech bubble, you could argue that the demand might cool off once investors lose interest or companies realize the math doesn't work anymore. But that's not how the major players are treating it. The United States sees AI as an economic, military, and technological priority. China sees it the same way. And the largest technology companies see it as the next platform shift. And they don't want to be the company that falls behind. The pressure to build is coming from a lot of different directions at once. It is coming from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Washington, Beijing, defense contractors, cloud companies, chip makers, and every major business that thinks AI may determine who wins the next decade. Even if some individual projects slow down, even if some companies overbuild, and if parts of the AI market correct, the broader race for computing power is unlikely to simply disappear. And that is also very different from the crypto mining surge we saw a few years ago. Crypto mining could move quickly, chase cheap power, and shut down when prices change. But AI is becoming more deeply embedded into the cloud computing, search, logistics, finance, military planning, software development, medicine, manufacturing, and the basic tools businesses use every day. Once companies build their operations around that kind of computing, the demand becomes harder to unwind. Seen that way, the electricity demand starts to make more sense. These companies are building at this scale because computing power has become strategic power. AI may look like software from the outside, but beneath the surface is a physical infrastructure race. It takes chips, servers, cooling systems, land, water substations, transmission access, and enormous amounts of electricity. The larger this race becomes, the more the digital economy starts competing with households, factories, hospitals, and local communities for the same underlying power system. For years, many Americans really thought of the internet as weightless. Files were in the cloud. Apps lived on phones. AI felt like a software. But the cloud, it's not a cloud. It is buildings, land, water, transformers, substations, backup generators, power purchase agreements, transmission lines, workers, steel, concrete, and electricity. The digital world has a physical footprint, and now that footprint is getting a lot larger. A company announces a new AI campus, and that campus needs a huge amount of electricity. The utility has to figure out how to serve it, which may require new generation, new substations, new transmission, or new capacity purchases. Those projects require money, labor, equipment, permits, and time. And if the system can't keep up cleanly, the pressure shows up through delays, price increases, local conflict, or reliability concerns. We're already seeing the signs as large power users wait longer to connect, utilities rewrite their demand forecasts, communities fight over new data centers, and grid operators warn that the power demand they expect years from now is starting to show up much sooner. Building the grid is slower than building demand. A data center can be planned around a business cycle, but a grid infrastructure is planned around engineering, regulation, land rights, supply chains, and public approval. A new gas plant can take years. A nuclear restart or life extension is complex. A new transmission corridor can get tied up for a decade. Large transformers, they have long lead times. Skilled electric labor is not infinite. And this conflict is playing out in communities across America, maybe at this very moment in yours as well. Right now, local to me in Temecula, California, SDG&E is proposing 140 miles of 500 kilovolt high voltage transmission towers that would run directly through the city. And even though this town, Temecula, doesn't get power from this line, and the city has officially opposed it. And your community may be engaged in a similar power conflict. And if you are, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below this video. Let us know. Even when most people agree more power is needed, the process is slow, and the agreement usually breaks down over where it goes, who pays, and who has to live next to it. Communities, they push back against new transmission lines. They push back against power plants. They push back against data centers because of noise, water use, land use, local tax deals, and the feeling that residents carry the burden while distant companies get the benefit. And that local resistance is not always irrational. People are looking at their own roads, their water, their own property values, their own bills, and beginning to ask why their community should absorb the strain of someone else's growth and profits. National ambition is running into local reality. Everyone wants electricity to be reliable. Many people want AI progress. Many people want cleaner energy. A lot of people want manufacturing brought back to the United States. People want electric vehicles, heat pumps, battery plants, chip factories, and modern infrastructure. But all of those goals, they require power. Not symbolic power or political talking points, but actual electricity delivered to the right place at the right time through physical infrastructure that already has stress points. And the difficulty in this is a collision of all these forces. There is not one villain, one policy, or just one company behind it all. The system is being asked to do more at the same time that replacing and expanding it has become expensive, slow, and politically difficult. Weather is where all of this pressure gets tested in real time. And the grid may look stable on an average day, but average days are not usually what expose the weakness. The stress shows up when heat settles over a region for several days and millions of air conditioners run almost nonstop, or when a sudden cold snap forces homes, businesses, and utilities to pull hard at the same time. Add a storm, wildfire flood, high winds, a plant outage, or a fuel constraint into the same window, and guess what? The grid has less room to absorb the surprise. The danger is not that one hot day or extreme weather event automatically takes the country down, although we've seen that kind of thing in regions of the country. The concern is that a system with less cushion has fewer ways to recover when several things go wrong at once. Northern Virginia is one of the clearest examples of how this becomes more than a technology story. It became the center of the data center world because of fiber connections, land availability, tax policy, proximity to major customers, and an existing technology corridor. But concentration creates strain. If a region becomes the place where the digital economy wants to plug in, the local grid has to absorb that demand. So eventually, those costs leave the planning documents and move into utility filings, capacity markets, local politics, and the question every household cares about, which is who pays. In Virginia, state-level analysis has warned that ordinary residential customers could eventually see higher monthly bills if the cost of new grid infrastructure is spread across everyone instead of being isolated to the largest new users. In the PJM grid region, which serves tens of millions of people across the Mid-Atlantic and Midwest, the Market Monitor has warned that data center demand is already contributing to sharp increases in capacity prices. Wholesale market costs are not the same thing as your home bill, but they show how grid strain can move through the system. Now, demand requires more generation, more transmission, and more backup capacity. And those costs, they show up in utility plans, capacity markets, future rate increases, and long-term infrastructure charges. And over time, they can work their way into the retail bill that lands, guess where? At your house. The average American may never step inside an AI data center, but they may still help pay to power one. Most people hear AI data center and they think it has nothing to do with them. But when a new data center requires substations, transmission lines, backup capacity, generation, or other grid upgrades, those costs, they don't disappear. The corporation may pay for part of it, but it often does not pay for everything needed to strengthen the surrounding grid. So in plain English, households can end up helping fund the upgrades needed to serve massive new users, even if those households never even asked for the project and only notice it when the monthly bill gets harder to absorb. Seen from the household level, the issue is not only whether the lights go out, it is price, priority, and margin. Someone has to decide who gets connected first, who pays for upgrades, which communities carry the water, land, and power burden, which households see higher bills, which regions have enough reserve capacity during heat waves, and which utilities are already falling behind. Households can feel that in very practical ways. A few hours without power can be inconvenient, but a day without power can refrigerate food, shut down work, knock out the internet, and make a house dangerous in extreme heat or cold. Several days without power can affect water, medical devices, communications, transportation, fuel, and local stores. Rising electricity costs create a much different kind of strain because they hit every month. They affect fixed income households, families already stretched by food, insurance, rent, and debt, and small businesses that need refrigeration, lighting, equipment, or climate control. A grid can remain mostly functional and still become harder for ordinary households to live under. Grid operators live in the world of margins, and they think about reserves, peak demand, available generation, transmission constraints, and what happens if a large generator trips offline at the wrong moment. Most households do not think that way because they don't have to. They only know whether the power works. They know the grid has a problem when the lights go out or when they flip a switch and nothing happens. So when demand grows faster than expected, reserve margins, they become important. A region can look fine most days and still be vulnerable during a heat wave. It can have enough annual energy and still lack enough deliverable power at a specific hour in a specific place. And it can have generation on paper that does not help if transmission is constrained. And that is the part that I think a lot of people are missing here. The issue is not just whether America can produce more electricity in a general sense. The issue is whether the right electricity can reach the right place at the exact moment that most people need it. The answer is not as simple as saying America needs more power plants. America needs the right power in the right place with the right transmission at the right time and enough backup and flexibility to handle peak stress. That problem is much harder than a slogan because every part of the solution takes time. New generation has to be financed, permitted, built, connected, and fueled. Transmission lines have to cross rural communities, and transformers, substations, and switchgear may have to be manufactured and installed. Regulators have to approve the costs, and someone eventually has to pay for them. So, what happens next probably will not be one dramatic national blackout that reveals a whole problem at once. It will likely show up unevenly with faster progress in some regions and slower progress in others. Some utilities are going to buy themselves more room by managing demand, building capacity, and upgrading infrastructure early. Others are going to still struggle because demand arrives faster than the planning process, their equipment, or their local politics can absorb. Data center states may attract investment and jobs, then spend years arguing over who has to pay for the power lines, substations, backup capacity, and water demand needed to support them. And that's why the next few years are going to feel confusing. You may be already seeing headlines about new power plants, nuclear restarts, large battery projects, transmission corridors, smart grid upgrades, and massive investment in energy infrastructure. At the same time, you're going to also see higher bills, project delays, local opposition, capacity warnings, and more concern about peak demand. Now, both can be true at once. The country can be building more power and still feel strain while it tries to catch up. For households, the outcome may look less like one national crisis and more like a steady loss of margin. It may show up through higher utility bills, more pressure during peak demand, more fights over local infrastructure, and outages that still come from storms, wildfires, heat waves, equipment failures, or human error. But it's going to land harder because the system underneath them has less room to absorb the shock. The common thread through all of this is margin. If demand keeps rising while infrastructure lags, that margin is going to get thinner. Disruption begins to matter more because the system has less room to absorb them. None of this is a reason to panic, but it is a reason to stop treating electricity as a guaranteed background service that's always going to be cheap, stable, and available exactly when you need it. For your household, the first step is not buying the biggest generator that you can find. The first step is deciding what level of disruption you want to be able to ignore. A 6-hour outage, an overnight outage, a 2-day outage, a recurring outage, they're all different problems, and they require different levels of preparation. And that is where a lot of people get stuck. They start with products and immediately fall into the rabbit hole of solar generators, gas generators, whole home batteries, rooftop solar, transfer switches, and large battery systems. Before long, they're buried in specs, wattage charts, runtime estimates, reviews, opinions, and endless debates over which setup is best. After a while, all those options can turn into paralysis. Look, don't get me wrong. Those details, they do matter, but they come after the most important decision, which is what your household actually needs to keep working when the power is out. A practical power plan does not require you to disconnect from the grid, and it does not require you to jump straight into a full energy independence. Most households can still reduce their exposure one layer at a time by identifying critical loads, protecting refrigeration, keeping communications running, planning for medical needs, and creating at least one way to function when the grid is under strain. The country may eventually build enough generation, transmission, storage, and backup capacity to handle this new era of demand. AI infrastructure may also become more efficient. And I hope both happen, but they're going to take time, money, and political will, and your household still has to live through this transition. I'm probably like you in that I don't want to hang the stability of my home on hope or leave it entirely in the hands of tech companies, utilities, and politicians. In part 2 of this video series, we're going to walk you through the levels of household power resilience and how to think through them without getting overwhelmed or wasting money on the wrong setup. I'm going to link to that video below when it's available, also along with the city prepping brief and any backup power guides that we built for you. Because this channel is not just about identifying problems, it's about finding practical solutions where they matter most at home. As always, stay safe out there.